Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft. This is Season 3, Episode 10. I cannot believe we have that many, but we do. And today's topic is witch wars. That's a word you hear a lot online. Today's topic is witch wars. So we're going to be talking about both the historical concept of that within craft, so the groups that fought a little, argued a little, renounced each other, very, very publicly. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the modern culture of it too, particularly since, we have experience with it. We've all been on social media. Very few witches I know are not. And everybody experiences it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. As always, please subscribe to Hex Education if you're watching us through YouTube. If you're watching us through Facebook, give us a like or give us a share. We always love to see you here. We see all of your comments, and we're going to be taking calls later in the show. But I'm going to pass it over to Brian to give his little intro about witch wars.
So technically, this is our 35th episode, and 36th or 37th if you count the 2 double episodes we've had.
There have been some doubles.
You know what I just realized is we don't ever do the tarot card thing anymore.
Oh, we don't?
I got this. I can't remember her name, so I probably shouldn't mention it. But I'll save it. I've got an idea for Season 3 of these cards we might use. But anyway, or Season 4. We're on 3 now, right? Yeah. It'll be Season 4 if we do another season, right? Mm-hmm. Ooh, let's hope we don't get cancelled.
Anyway, who's going to cancel us?
Christian. So, hello everyone. So I actually did want to, before we get into tonight's subject, I wanted to discuss something off the cuff, which I'll probably discuss later on as well. And it's about the New Orleans Coven and our work with outsiders, non-initiates, and what that's looking like right now, because I'm getting a lot of inquiries from people. So I know some of you watch the show. So we're hopeful, because some of us are already vaccinated or on our way to be vaccinated. Most of the New Orleans Coven, all of the New Orleans Coven is on board with vaccination, really.
Yep.
So that's kind of like our thing. Like, we're really happy that once we get vaccinated, we feel like we can be more comfortable, and we are one of those few covens that have continuously kept meeting for much of COVID-19. We didn't meet the initial spring when it all came out, because everyone was like, not sure what was going on, and so we went into quarantine completely and only had online activities with each other. But we started carefully meeting and observing most of our practices. Some of our practices we couldn't continue. For instance, the sacred orgy was put on hold.
It's hard to do during COVID. It's rough times
all
for
cats
everybody.
in the dark, but if they've got COVID, it's no fun.
No.
So we basically, are excited to be vaccinated. And so what I can tell you is that my feeling, about this is that sometime this summer, I think things are going to be it's going to be more of a potential that we may begin doing some public work, whether that's rituals of the store or soirees or what have you. As far as accepting new initiates, I have Levi and I both, and all of the priesthood have an obligation to protect the people who are already involved.
Yep.
So we're probably only going to want to bring people in who are fully vaccinated, because that's the only way we can offer some protection to the people who are in there. So if you're an anti-vaxxer, you probably no need to apply anytime soon. So, because,
repping that public
not
health.
Against anyone's beliefs, but,
I'm against your beliefs.
I will say this.
Aggressively.
Okay, so what you need to understand, and obviously I'm not a doctor, but I have some common sense. And I'll say that all the New Orleans Coven are full of very magical, psychic, perceptive witches. We've all so far been able to, not catch this. And I think that, knock on wood, not that that's a thing, but, I definitely feel like we would know if there was a danger, like somebody would have that feeling. And the thing I want to explain to people is that these vaccines are not containing the live virus. So they're not as dangerous as vaccines may have been in the past. And they do wear off. It's not a life vaccine. So even if you were to have some sort of reaction to it, the vaccine doesn't last forever. So it's not going to permanently damage you.
You're not going to be mutated.
The reason why this happened so fast is because you had the entire world's scientific community all working on the same thing and sharing information, which has never happened before in the history of mankind.
We used to fight a lot. We still do.
Why was the motivation there? It was money. We all know that, but it doesn't matter. Here we are. So, everyone should follow their own instincts, but I would say read up on it, understand the science.
Please don't follow your instincts. Listen to experts. Follow their instincts.
There is that too.
They're better than you.
I will say this. People who, what we do know is that there could be long-lasting, horrible side effects from the coronavirus. Yes. There are people who lose their hair, become brain damaged, who have recovered and are still in therapy for breathing treatments.
Yep. Scarring.
There's no evidence, even remotely, that there's any danger with the vaccine, but there is extreme evidence that there is danger to possibly having lifelong consequences to contracting the coronavirus if you are not vaccinated. Doesn't happen to everybody, but it could be you.
And what Brian's speaking
it's like
about,
polio, hey.
But we are a communal religion. It's very, tight knit. A coven is a small group of people, and it's very intimate. And so we do have to think about public health a little bit more than perhaps a religion that could practice social distancing easier. So it is important. It's not something that we're saying to be political or odd. It's just it does impact craft work very much so.
I'm not going to say all covens are going to have this philosophy, but I have a feeling most initiatory covens are going to be kind of on the same page that we're on, because of the fact that we are, we're kind of a hold hands, kissy bunch of people. So
it's a loving religion.
That. Anyway, so parlaying from that, witch wars. So, I thought, this is a title you get thrown around the internet quite often. And I thought it's a subject we haven't really addressed, is not only conflict, within the occult and witchcraft, but how initiatory craft actually guides us through such conflicts, or how it expresses to us that we can or should avoid it in the first place. Initiatory craft was designed before Facebook, before Instagram, before social media, but it doesn't change its wisdom, and the craft does have a set of rules. Whether or not everyone in the craft follows them, adheres to them, or takes the good advice within them, I cannot say. But I think that somebody with perception and reasonable intelligence can find value in anything. There is value in anything. It all has value. It all has power. And I think there's some really good advice and stuff that has worked within the materials that I think is applicable today in a different way. May not be to keep you from the noose. It may be to keep you from conflict, but it works either way. So we're going to kind of get into some of the history, experiences, and practices. Levi, please look at laptop. Turn off mask edges.
I'm going to. It's to get rid of the black.
Oh, well, you might as well do it now.
I'm going to. It won't fit. You can keep it. Won't interfere with the show at all.
I don't notice anything. So the other thing I want to say is we are a call-in show. So tonight, we're kind of welcoming calls on this subject or on any subject that has to do with Alexandrian witchcraft or witchcraft in general. Our topics are, of course, initiatory craft, centering mostly on Gardnerian Alexandrian. We're not here to represent the Cabot tradition or the Cochrane tradition. Those things could come up because we're talking about witchcraft. The number is 309-GODDESS, as you can see on the video. If you call in, you will get a screening process that will tell you, ask you to state what your topic is. I'm going to give you just a couple little tidbits of advice while we're training each other how to do this. Have questions, 1 or 2 questions. We're not asking you to come on and be on the show as a host or something like that. Obviously, if you're a troll or whatever, you're just going to get knocked off. And if you've got feedback, we're going to disconnect you immediately. We're not going to discuss it with you. So if you call in and you can hear us talking on your computer, it's going to create a really horrible feedback. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to disconnect those callers, and you're welcome to call back. But it's become kind of a problem that people can't hear us, and it's this echoing, annoying thing. So, that's on your end. We can't control it. So if you're calling, make sure you're calling where you don't have an open speaker. So that's mute your computer or whatever you need to do. So anyway, without further ado, witch wars. Let's talk about, and I actually am a little skewed on my history here. I think I know the answer, but I think the two get mixed up. So I think the first witch war that I think of coming into being was, this whole thing, what most people don't really realize is that the religion of witchcraft, or modern witchcraft in general, started out being expressed to the world through a man named Gerald Gardner, and it was in public view. He was a publicity witch. You know, he may not have called himself a publicity witch, but he was. He was the first witch on TV. He was the first witch to write a book about witchcraft by a witch. He wrote 2 of them, and then a few fiction ones as well. He was the first witch to be in newspapers and et cetera, interviews, radio interviews, things like that. So when other witches started coming onto the scene or emerging from the shadows, whichever interpretation you want to take, it was the first 2 that did were to call him out, because he was actually the one at that time who was the superstar. There wasn't another superstar. You know, he was the only famous witch, he was the only known witch, and he was the only spokesman. So you had 2 individuals. One was, and I think it was the first one, was Charles Cardell, and then another one was Robert Cochrane, and they both disliked Gerald Gardner. And I think their mythologies get mixed up, and I might even get a couple things mixed up. I believe it was Charles Cardell that actually termed the word Gardnerians, but some people say it was Cochrane, and I could be off. I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard both. But it was an insult word.
Yep.
I think that Cochrane's more well-known than Charles Cardell, but I believe Charles Cardell was the first one to come out against Gardner. And of course, he claimed it was in his family. He was running his own coven, and he believed, or said, he had the real deal, and Gardner was misrepresenting the craft, you know. And then Cochrane came along and basically said sort of the same thing later on. But I believe it was in that order. I could be wrong about that, guys, because I didn't double check my history before the show, and it's been years. You know, so a lot of stuff's gone on here. I've forgotten more than I remember. So, but in any case, these were the first witch wars, and they were done through letters and newspaper posts and gossip. Mm-hmm. You know, they didn't have social media, or it would have been more like what we see today.
It would have been very harsh
on social media.
Because Cochrane's comments were very harsh. Real quick, I'm going to center you. I know I'm selfish and I like to be in the center, but I've cut Brian off a little bit, so I'm so sorry.
But is it half my face showing?
I know. I cut you out when I set it up. I'm so sorry. But no, Brian is correct. It was pretty nasty. I mean, there's a...
Well, if I can see myself in there, I'm still in there.
Yeah, you're good. It was just a little too... It wasn't centered.
Oh, I see.
As a matter of fact, Cochrane is famous for saying once that he looked forward to a long night, a night of long knives, which is a reference...
Long night of the swords, I thought.
Yeah, which is a reference to, you know, Nazism. So, you know, it's not nice.
And that was Doreen that told us that, and she said, if I think of the stories right, she rose from her chair and said, well, I don't know what you're going to be doing tonight, but I have better things to do.
Yep.
But Doreen is actually the person, the reason we know a lot of what we know about Charles Cardell and Robert Cochrane is because Doreen Valiente worked with them as well. So she actually was in Charles Cardell's coven, and she was in Robert Cochrane's coven, and she was in Gerald Gardner's coven. So she is in a few traditions, and, you know, ended her career as a spokesman of paganism in the UK.
Yep.
So in her book publication, she told us a lot about these individuals, and then she later worked with other people that authored books as well. But she's the primary reason, the primary source material for our information on Cardell and Cochrane actually comes from her writings. Very early on. It's much later that you have anything else really written about these gentlemen. And I think she may be some of the only source material for Cardell. Though there is some things, like Cardell had there was a priestess that was with Gardner who also then went off with Cardell outside of Doreen.
There was a history of that.
Could have been Doreen. I don't really know, but I heard there was another one. So there was an exchange. So they had these sort of things. I'm not going to get into like who was right and who was wrong, because that's not the point of this. Point is, it was kind of a public display for whatever their motives were. I think, you know, obviously to tell the public, no, I'm the real deal. No, I'm the real deal. Mm-hmm. No, I'm the real deal. And obviously Gerald Gardner won that battle. And as far as I know, he won it by just doing his work, because I don't remember him ever saying anything about Charles Cardell or Robert Cochrane. Like,
not in the negative.
Not a word that I know of. So, I mean, maybe behind doors he did. I don't know. But, you know, when he went on and talked about the craft, he talked about witchcraft and the work he did, you know. So I think that speaks to itself. But, you know, so that was the first big witch war, and it had some repercussions. but in the end, as I've said before, there's no one alive today who's like been initiated by someone who knew Robert Cochrane or who knew Charles Cardell. They're still legacies in the craft in their own right, but Gerald Gardner's obviously got quite a lot right now. So interesting story. So when I think about the next stage of witch wars, I have to think about my own progenitor, Alexander's. And once again, it kind of comes down to, after Gardner, a lot of other witches took up the mantle of being publicity witches.
Yes.
And it's something me and Christian love reminding a lot of initiates of, because there's a mindset with some initiates today of, oh, you shouldn't do that. And it's like, do you know where you come from?
They all did it.
Do you know where you come from? So, yeah, Doreen obviously did it. Patricia Crowther did it. Lois Bourne, to a lesser extent, Eleanor Bone. Lois Bourne and Eleanor Ray Bone. Thank you.
Bone.
Mixed that up. Lady Olwen, all of those people, sort of were in their own right trying to do it. And, it kind of comes, and, I suspect Cochrane and Cardell were trying to do it on some level too. They were trying to get the attention. And, Alex, stole the show at one point in time. He just did.
The microphone.
Whether you want to call it him just being, a showman or whatever it was, he was able to get all of the interviews, all of the newspapers, all of everything at one point was majorly coming to him. And at this stage, you had other witches for other reasons who resented that. And so once again, you had a public display of witches saying, I'm the real deal, I'm the real deal, I'm the real deal, denounce. It was the same story that we already had. And once again, it kind of ended up the same way. Alex did just fine, didn't he? So today
did all right.
There's Alexandrians all over the world, and it's become, most Gardnerians and Alexandrians recognize each other as sister, brother, priesthood, whatever you want to call it, kissing cousins. And that's a whole story. Once again, not going to get into all of the little stories about it. You can easily read them, and they sometimes go into the realms of mythology. I did speak about some of them in my book, Initiation to Witchcraft,
available.
Which you can also find on iTunes.
I love a plug.
iTunes. You should be doing that more. You just need to. Patricia wrote a planet like me.
Also.
So that was like a really big thing, and in that sense, the main proponent was that Patricia really was the one who really disliked Alex, and there's a lot of myths why. Doesn't for the point of this conversation, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The point of it is it became whatever was going on behind the scenes. There's a myth that there was a coven that once every week made a doll of Maxine Sanders and cut its head off. And I've heard this story. And I don't remember how it came up with conversation with Maxine, but it came up. And I said, well, clearly it didn't work. And she looked at me and she said, well, now I don't have the same head I used to.
I like that.
So
I like that.
Yeah, it was good. There's the behind the scenes magical thing, and that's, to steal a line from a friend of Christian's, I would say the same thing. If you want to have a witch war with me, you go to your altar, I'll go to mine, and we'll just see how it pans out. It rather reminds me of two armies getting ready for battle, both praying to Jesus. It's like,
who does Jesus love more?
Who does Jesus love more?
Let's be honest, it's not you. It's not you. You're not his favorite.
You're not Jesus's favorite. So that was the big witch wars I think most people know. And then, you go on later on and you've had so many big public, and it's public. And it was really when you get to the birth of AOL.
Yeah, the birth.
Then it got really nasty. And it was here in the United States, because as we know, most people know, there was some rivalry that went on between Gardnerians and Alexandrians in the UK, cinching around that feud that I was just discussing. And then, of course, there were feuds between different factions of all of them at different times for different reasons. Or, you just don't always like everyone, do you? So AOL got born, and in the United States, it was the American Gardenerians who were prominently on AOL. They were the ones who first got on there and started most of the first witchcraft groups on AOL and things like that, and became kind of a dominant force. And it just changed the culture of what was in public view. And so these witches had the microphone on the internet first. It was the American Gardenerians that first had the internet microphone. And in an Alexandrian fashion, I'm sorry I took it. It happens. But, at one point in time, they were the dominant microphone on the internet. And, once again, we had a witch war. But this time it was American Gardenerians against American Gardenerians. And a lot of that played out on AOL. And once again, it was a public grab. And I think that's always been I think it's gotten more intense because now people consider their reputation on the internet to be more personal than I think people considered the media reputation. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that, back in the day, if somebody wrote an article about you that was negative in some pagan magazine,
so much more limited.
It wouldn't have impacted you as deeply as if somebody does it on AOL. And so certainly a certain amount of bullying has gone on in that respect as well. But you had this public battle going on that definitely has repercussions that are still lasting today. And those are witch wars and what they do. And at this point, I'm speaking obviously all about Gardenerians and Alexandrians and how these witch wars have played out in the public eye. Can you think of any I'm sort of missing, maybe?
In the grand scheme of our history?
Yeah.
I mean, the big ones I would say is, recapping Cochrane and Cardell, and then Alex and the rise of Alexandrians. The schism that happened in American Gardenerian craft that Brian talked about, it was very nasty, very, very heated.
It's still going on for some people.
It's still going on for a lot of
Just
people.
like there are still some Gardenerians and Alexandrians that are it still exists. It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys. But I think for the most part, it's healing.
It's more healing and fun.
In both centers. I think American Gardenerians, most of them are well over that.
Yeah.
Not all of them, though. I've seen the ones who aren't.
But no, those are the big ones in traditional lineage craft. Outside of craft, of course, there's tons. But in the lineage traditions, those would be the biggies, for sure.
And I had my own personal experience that, of course, I was going to talk about. And as you notice, we're kind of trying to keep out the sordid details, just because that's not really the purpose of this, right? I think this is more of a conversation about how can we learn from this, and is it good, is it bad, what do we get out of it? And I'm going to give you an example based on experience, because I didn't experience these other schisms. I did have a little bit of an effect from the last one, because I do have California Gardenerian lineage. I'm not a California Gardenerian witch. I don't see it that way, but I have upline who at one point in time were, and so there's, it's in the DNA, I guess you could say. So I've had attacks labored on me because of something that happened before I was ever in the craft, and something that I have nothing to do with. So I think that's where I can see how this thing still goes on. And of course, as an Alexandrian, I have had Gardenerians say things to me. I've had a Gardenerian once say to me something. It was a gentleman who was involved with Amber and Jet, I think it was. I don't remember his name, but he sent me a message and he said, "I've known many Alexandrians like you who hate Gardenerians." And I didn't have any hatred towards Gardenerians. Still don't.
We love them.
And especially at that time, I really wasn't even mentally wrapping my head around all of it yet. So, it took me some time to become a cemented Alexandrian mentally, because there was just so much coming at me at that point in my history. And that's where, for me, something good came out of it. Because when I came out of the broom closet as an initiate on social media, I went knocking onto these initiatory groups, and I was like, "Hello."
Maybe not with that voice.
I think I had that voice at the time.
God help us.
I was wearing my little short pants. I was super excited to meet fellow new initiates and to just I felt
sounds so innocent, doesn't it?
I was, and I really felt like I was just going to get a bunch of blessed bees and hugs and great conversations, and I was really excited because all the initiates that I'd met in person had been Gardnerians or Alexandrians, had been extremely pleasant to me, and we'd shared glasses of wine, and I was really looking forward to it. No, at that point in time, no delusions of grandeur, no anything. Just wanted
I love how he said
involved.
at that point in time I didn't have the delusions of grandeur, as if to say, I have them now.
I don't quite have the same head I used to.
Exactly. I love how he's like, I have them now 100%.
Anyway, so I could develop them. So I'm on the verge. I'm on the verge of a glorious delusion.
The verge, please.
So, in any case, without getting into all the nastiness, I was given a pedigree that was like a lot of things. It was like, here's who you come from. Here's all the things that you are. And, I think the claims were Kentish line Alexandrian, California line Gardnerian, and Whitecroft. And the Whitecroft was called into question by someone, and there were conversations that occurred, and there was a disagreement about whether or not that was legit. I had nothing to do with this. Okay? This is the funny salient point. I had just been initiated. I wasn't leading a coven yet. I wasn't trained. I was literally like the boy with the short pants holding my piece of paper. Hello, let me into the treehouse. And the Gardnerians were instantly wanting to tar and feather me. It was a full-on witch hunt. Not all of them, but the public ones. The ones who, and I don't mean famous ones. I mean the public Facebook ones. The people that were running these groups began just attack, and gossip and crazy stuff that were coming up. Meanwhile, the Alexandrians were all like, well, kid, you've arrived, blessed be. We don't feel sorry for you because we're quite used to this behavior. Do you think he's going to live?
Maybe.
Let's watch him for a little while. What do you think he's going to do? I felt much more embraced, let's put it that way. And, a lot's happened since then. Obviously, I've gone on to take lineage under Val Hughes and to receive great training and fully dedicate myself to the Alexandrian path. But in those initial days, I was caught in like a witch war that had nothing to do with me per se, yet I was like made temporarily the bullseye of this. And this is the dark side. And for me, I'm actually very grateful for all of that. I believe that was like the force that was guiding me to the work that I needed to do. I was in a state of confusion. It was a part of my initiation. I think that conflict was actually magically a part of my initiation, bringing me to where I need to be. So in that sense, I find that conflict to be something that I treasure as a part of my experience. It took me a while to realize that, of course. Whereas, for other people, it might have shattered them, but that's what initiation does, doesn't it? Initiation shatters some people.
Welcome.
It doesn't always, not everyone gets through the gauntlet, right? So,
some of them don't make it.
Some of them don't make it. Some of them go crazy. So, I'm very grateful for it. Do I think it was right of them? No, I don't think it was proper. And it certainly wasn't discerning. Nobody was asking me questions, and nobody was going to the people who sold me a false bill of goods, or the people who sold them a false bill of goods. There were the people who needed to be questioned, tarred and feathered, were left quite well alone. And I'm not talking about anyone in my immediate existence, but I'm not going to name names because I'm not like the Gardnerians I met in 2014.
Classy.
Well, I might have called some names out then, but they started it. So, yes, I've had my experience of witch wars. And of course, being a public witch on any level, I'm now faced with quote unquote witch wars all the time. How do I deal with it? I now ignore these people. They don't exist to me. And most of it's not even
we have that button.
Witches. Most of it's not even witches.
You don't even exist to me.
It's from the craft. We have that button.
Most of them aren't witches who we deal with nowadays. The pagan community is its own, beast. And in that sense, it's really bizarre to me because I'm not directly involved in the pagan community. I don't actually actively put myself in anything that has to do with the pagan community.
No.
Other than the fact that I have magical stores and I'm a witch. And on some modern level, there's some sort of perceived crossover there, which I could go into other subjects about that. But it's but personally, it's not something I require, desire, have any input. It's I'm not trying to feed that. I'm not trying to lift it, crush it. I don't really care about it. It's not anything to do with me, really.
No.
Aside from the perception. Yes, if I'm being interviewed by some reporter and they come at me with, you're Wiccan and you're part of the pagan community, that is not my opportunity to explain things to them because usually the vision is bigger than that. And so in that sense, we do have that mutual crossover. And of course, I'm going to spin the whole thing in a positive light. I'm not going to be like, well, you see, I don't use this term and I don't use that term and blah, 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 blah.
They won't hear you.
No. So it's irrelevant. It's kind of the same reason why I often will roll occasionally with the word warlock because my husband has used it for years. And reporters get really confused when he's like, I'm a warlock and he's a witch. And it's like, well, you all know what that basically says, right? So I just let it roll. I don't hate any label. There's no label I hate. I don't hate the label pagan. It's just not how I ascribe myself. It's not
a good descriptor.
It's also not a term that was used in the Alexandrian tradition. The Alexandrian tradition did not use the term pagan early on. Later on, there are Alexandrians who did because of what's gone on, but early, and they're describing the pre-Christian peoples sometimes too. Pre-Christian practices. It's all like I say with the word witch. It's what conversation are you having right now? But as far as I somehow identify as the same in the same group of people as someone who practices Norse heathenism, I don't.
It's just too different.
I'm not a polytheist. I'm not into Norse stuff. We have nothing in common. And almost everyone I meet in those groups is usually really misogynistic guys who want to practically be bikers. Or they're
not that we're judging you,
racist,
folk.
And their wives. Right? So now if you love Norse gods and everything, I don't mind that. I'm part Swedish, so I'm not anti that, but I'm not actively practicing.
It's just not a good. It's kind of like if you were to say lump together two radically different, for example, if you're a secular person, you might lump a Mormon and a Catholic together as Christians, but you are so far apart at that point that they don't recognize each other as valid. There's no connection to their practices. It's radically different. So just because there's this umbrella term that might describe them in some sociological way, it's not the lived reality.
Here's my umbrella term. If you practice the religion of witchcraft, we have probably a lot of things in common as people.
Yes.
You worship a god, presumably horned god, and a moon goddess. You have a god and a goddess. You believe in magic as a part of your spiritual identity. You're a ritualist. You probably work with the 8 Sabbats. You may or may not believe in the sanctity of initiation. So we might have some things in common. The only people I see as being like me to the core are Gardnerians and Alexandrians. I don't recognize any other tradition of magic as being like me to the core. That doesn't mean that we don't have things in common.
Yeah, no.
If you're on the path of magic, we have something in common. And I admire anyone who's on the path of magic. If you're on the path of initiation, even in other traditions like voodoo or whatever, we have something in common. We're both on the path of initiation. So it's,
yes,
we can find things in common, but that doesn't make us all one thing. Now, it does make us the freaks of the religious world in the greater scheme of things, and I can understand why we sometimes come together. The problem is that we have all of these quote-unquote self-appointed elders in every city, in every place in the world who are the pagan elders of their local pagan little groups, and they all do the same things. And they get on the internet, and they're experts, and you've got all these people who've written pamphlets and things like that, and they're fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, and they feel like they own everyone.
Yes.
And I'm not owned by somebody like that, quite frankly. This is where we're going to get into it before we get into some questions. What does the craft teach us, and what does the craft tell us to do with this process? I think Gerald Gardner followed it. I think it was the secret to his success, and the greatest thing he ever gave the craft: autonomy.
Yep.
Secrecy, privacy. When he put himself in public, it was not to discuss witches individually. That was against his way. He wasn't talking about other witches. He wasn't divulging who other witches were. He was just talking about witchcraft. And Alex was the same way. You never saw Alex go on the offensive with most of these people. You know, you never saw him use his media as a weapon. He used his media for the work he was doing, not as a weapon against other witches. You know, and that's what the craft teaches us. The craft teaches us that you're in your own coven, you're in your own circle, and you should mind your own business. You know, and that's where I try to live. You know, it does make it difficult when it's involving people I care about, or when it involves business or things like that. But I try to keep those worlds separate, and I find that generally speaking, outside of a few very badly behaved initiates, most witches are on the same page. It's in our egregore, it's in our teachings, and it's in the true spirit of the work. If you're really walking this path for the path of magic and to reach the gods and to elevate yourself into a higher being, you don't have time to be thinking about people that you're not doing that with, right? The dogs are very excited about this topic. Anyway, I got on a bit of soapbox. I'm going to hand the microphone off to Levi, and then he might take some questions for us.
Yeah. I think I'll
and
go...
you can call in 309
Yes.
Goddess.
I think I'll
Tiki,
go
come
back
here.
because to go back to some of the questions, to go ahead and interact with the people. Hi, people. No, I'm going to go all the way back to Hector's question. He was our first one, and he said, how have witch wars influenced the craft? For example, I find that some people change things out of spite or to distance themselves from the people they're at war with. And then he changed it and said, like, for example, to say, well, this is my thing now. I will say this. What I actually see happening a lot, Hector, is there's this weird thing that will happen sometimes in initiatory craft, because I do want to, like Brian, keep it to initiatory craft as much as possible, not just talk about the whole pagan umbrella. There are people who will find out that maybe their training wasn't great, because a lot of the early American elders did not have the technology we have now, so training was incomplete. They'll find that out, and instead of being humble and saying, okay, well, maybe let's reconnect, let's join the wider community in the UK, our elders, our traditions that have been handed down or whatever, they'll say, well, no, I like the way I do it and screw them and I don't want to do it now. And then they get very defensive. And so instead of being open and humble to the teaching, they'll be very defensive. And they'll be like, well, no, this is just the way we do it. And they create whole new traditions and whole new systems that are frankly unnecessary and often not as beautiful. And it's sort of devolved on some level. And I do see that sometimes. And that is 100% just about ego. So I do think it has influenced initiatory craft in that way. The second thing I'll say before I let Brian answer is I also have seen some initiates, not a lot, but some initiates in America in particular, who have been so pummeled and influenced by the wider pagan and people who call themselves Wiccans or people who call themselves pagans, that they have adopted it. And they have adopted a style of practice or certain practices that are really foreign to the original practice of initiatory craft.
Some of that is also they came into it with that.
Exactly. They've brought it in.
Let go of it.
But it's very foreign. I will tell you, I've been to big pagan gatherings. I've been to large neo-pagan
How'd
events.
that go for you?
Well, and then I've also been to circles here and in other countries. In England, in Portugal, here. They are radically different. Like, the initiatory craft circle is not the same as a neo-pagan gathering. And that's not to say, not to disparage anyone, it's just that they're different. And yet, I've also seen some initiates speak in ways or act in ways where I'm like, you're bringing that in from paganism. That's what that is.
Just like people bring things in from Christianity
Yes.
or whatever. It's not necessarily intentional. It's often subconscious. For my take on his question, I wanted to say, skip past it a little bit so I'm going to lose it.
Oh, I'll go back up to it.
Sorry, I did have a thing I wanted to
How has it
add.
influenced the craft?
I mean, Levi covered it really well, but I did have a thought. Yes, I think one of the things I've experienced is that people will sometimes create their own mythologies in order to shape things to like make it look like they have the expertise. A story I can tell you, and I don't have this firsthand, but when they were discussing moving Gerald Gardner's body from where it is, I was told that at the time Lois Bourne was being consulted, and the general rule of thumb in the craft, because as some of you may know, Ray Bone actually set up, redid his grave for him where he's buried. And from what I got, the general rule was they were not going to touch his grave unless Patricia approved of it, which maybe she did or didn't, I don't know that, but it didn't get moved. But there was a contingency of witches in the United States who believed that his body should be moved here because they believed that America was the birthplace of Gardnerian witchcraft. And I don't know how anyone could have that delusion, but I'm telling you, delusions do go that far. There are American witches who think that they have the real information and that the UK's full of it. I don't know how. I don't know, because I'll be the first one to tell you, I know that's not true.
Yeah.
I love my American witches. I was brought in originally by Sandra Wright. She's wonderful, and she has some UK influence as well. I later trained with Val Hughes, and of course I've got to meet a lot of the British witches. But I've met some American initiates as well. And the stories they tell me sometimes, I don't understand how they could believe them. But it is twisting that mythology to validate yourself, I think. So.
I think part of the issue, the difference between
I'm not going, West Wing on that whole question.
No. I think you're hitting on something that is important, is that when the craft came to America, it was in some ways in the early days a little bit severed because it was hard to get information back and forth to the quickness that we're used to.
That don't think there should be American witches.
It was difficult.
I think they're full of it.
But Americans, the other thing to remember is that American nature is a little bit more go get them obsessive, quick, fast, like we got to know, we got to do the thing, right? And so what I think happened in a lot of cases is they would start to believe that they needed everything to be P's and Q's and it had to be this perfect, like, I understand everything, blah, blah, blah. Whereas a lot of the initiates I've met who are a little older, who have been in craft for a long time, is they kind of have a lighter touch when it comes to witchcraft history, the concept of the old religion. They know what they're saying. It's all done in this sort of like clever cloak and dagger kind of way, whereas Americans just want to get to this bare argument. And I think it just creates a needless division.
If you're following the autonomy of the craft, you don't need delusions because, I do encourage every group of initiates out there. I can tell you in the New Orleans Coven, it is something that my students have very much appreciated, that I have brought in people who are experts on things within the initiatory craft to teach us so that we could be better witches. I didn't have to always hold the baton or pretend I knew everything. I'm the first one to tell you when I don't know something.
This is true.
Do you want to know why?
It's a good teacher.
Because I want to know. Mm-hmm. I want to know. And I always say that my students are my best teachers, either by their mistakes or mine, or an expertise they bring to the table, or an angle. Levi teaches children. He can tell you, even a child can sometimes ask you a question you've totally never considered.
Opens your mind up in a whole new way.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
See it from a different angle.
So I love all that. But your coven is the place where you really get to immerse yourself into the craft, where you're actually going to work witchcraft with other people, where you're going to spend your lives magically with people for a time at least. That's the hub of the craft, not Facebook, not a park, not even the grand Sabbats are really a hub. That's a place where the witches come from all over the world sometimes to gather, and they're magnificent. I've only ever been to one where witches Alexandrians from all over the world gathered. And it was an amazing experience to meet these witches from all over the world. And I think there was a weird bond formed between all of us, but then we went back to our own hives. Mm-hmm. And that's how this works. we're not really meant as witches to be in large groups.
We don't have a Vatican.
It can't work. It won't work.
No.
And we're certainly not meant to represent or be involved in some modern pagan throng. We are a mystery tradition. It is about the work of the initiate. Yes, we do public work. It's a part of our egregore. It's a part of our history.
Yep.
But that should be for educational purposes and to teach mankind about our gods and the fact that magic is real. That's our relationship with humanity, not to be in like a popularity contest,
But no, that's absolutely true. We are not meant to be a mass religion. Some religions are. They're salvationist
Not
religions.
in the Orthodox sense.
No. We are not supposed to be a mass system of salvation the way that most like Mahayana Buddhist schools or the vast majority of Christianity or Islam. We are not here to be a salvationist religion. It's an initiatory religion, so it's a little different. I wanted to take the end of Christopher's comment where he's talking about all of his experience in the witch world, and he said, is often these witch wars seem to be more about interpersonal conflict. That's also true. Sometimes
a different kind of witch war.
Sometimes the conflict is you'll blame a whole tradition or a whole coven or a whole group of people, but in reality you're just mad at a person, right? And it's a fight between two people. And so that does happen a lot.
Without getting too into it, I think that if anyone really studies the history, and I do talk about a little bit in my book, for instance, between Alex and Patricia Crowther, I think it's very clear something deeply personal went on there. And, I'm not saying Patricia didn't have a right to be upset, but nobody gets that upset at a stranger for decades. It doesn't happen. So, I think that it's pretty clear that, yes, those kind of witch wars happen too, but those witch wars are usually not supposed to be in public purview.
Unfortunately.
Like, if you are in a coven or you leave a coven, you should never discuss that coven publicly again. Like, that's part of your oaths. If Levi were to have left the New Orleans coven for good, bad, or ugly reasons, or whatever they were, he wouldn't get online and talk about us.
No.
Like, that's your first sign that you're dealing with somebody who's not being honest. And vice versa, we wouldn't come out and openly talk about anyone who's been in our coven and name them, unless we were really forced to.
And it's just not something we do. But a lot of witch wars, I do think, will begin with bruised ego. I think that's a huge part of it. Like I said earlier in the show, when I think that there are elders, for example, who might have felt that their teaching was being questioned, or their lineage or whatever.
Okay, you guys are just seeing ghosts tonight.
The house is haunted. The dogs are mad.
They're like super into each other and come here, Tiki. Tiki, come here.
Everybody, this is Tiki. He's in a witch war.
I don't know. He's being really funny. Tank and him want to play while this is going on, which is highly unusual because Tiki normally wants to be on camera. So he's having his own little witch war.
He's having a witch war. But no, bruised ego, that is a huge part of it. And the other thing is I will say two things. One, the smaller the community, the worse the fight. And so that's just a truth. And this is a small community. It really is. We're a tiny religion in the grand scheme. And the smaller the community, everyone knows each other, it's more incestuous, and it's much easier to get into a fight. This is why the fight with the Thanksgiving table are the worst fights. They're way worse than when you fight with the lady at the bank because you got shortchanged. It's because you know them, you know everything, you can go for the jugular. So that's part of the problem. Well, I'm going to say three things. The second part is this is a magical religion, so it attracts people with big egos. It attracts people who think they have power and who want to command the universe and the angels and command demons and whatever. That is going to attract people who fight a lot. And the third thing is we're a newer religion. And I'm not getting into the debate about history. I'm literally just talking about organized public witchcraft. Because of that, newer religions are more hostile. They have to make their name. This happened in Christianity in the early days when they were killing Gnostic heretics left and right and when they were burning books. This happened with the Mormon church when they were making their big migration and Joseph Smith was killed by a mob. All new religions go through that phase too where they're a little bit testy, right? Because they're trying to prove themselves. So those three things combined, I think, create an environment where witch wars are going to be a thing no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing we can say that's going to ever make it end. It's already a thing, right? You got human beings going on. But I would like to say to all the initiates watching that, really, we should sometimes just mind our own business.
Yes.
I don't mean that just out of manners, but I also mean it out of power. You put your focus where it should be. You know, you cannot do anything, nor do you have any control over what's going on outside of your small little sphere. The best control you can do, if you think you are representing the craft correctly, the best thing you can do is seed it correctly and represent it correctly without bringing other people into the conversations. You know, obviously we can't avoid historical people, but, you know, we should be more about that, teaching people about the history. And here's the other thing I'm going to tell you, and I know it to be true. Whenever initiates get on and fight each other publicly, it's really a turn-off for the non-initiates.
It is.
It's
immensely.
It really makes them look down on us. And I've gotten lots of, you know, when I had that experience happen to me, do you know how many non-initiates began to despise certain, you know, I'm not going to go to there, but I got more support than they probably did because they made themselves look so bad, and it was a bad reflection of their tradition. If I went out here and started witch hunting all the time, being like, you know, oh, you're not really Alexandrian, and you're not really Alexandrian, you're not this, and you're not that, and you're doing it wrong, and I was constantly publicly like attacking people that way, I wouldn't earn friends, and I wouldn't earn support, and I wouldn't earn the kind of initiates I want. Would you have come to my group if that's what I was doing?
No.
I don't think anyone worth their mettle would.
I will tell you,
no.
The number one thing people tell me, because I work at a witchcraft shop in a small way. My main profession is education, but I do, you know, work in a small way. And so I do have these conversations. And I will tell you, the number one thing that people tell me, and I hate admitting this even because it does make me sad, about why somebody does not feel like they could follow through with initiation, seek out a traditional coven, train with any kind of coven, not just Alexandrian or Gardnerian, but the concept of a coven in general, is because of the witch wars online and the state of social media and how toxic it is. That's their number one thing.
And the fact that so many initiates have gotten into bed with pagan rabble.
Yes, and fought
really
and argued.
Turns people off.
It
People
really
who are
does.
really interested in genuine craft are looking for that occult deep belief system that, you know, they really want, you know, people who really believe
in the mysteries.
During the Sabbath, the horned god rises up and the goddess of the moon is there, and that we're working the realms of magic, and that there's a deep, foreboding richness within the earth that we're tapping into.
Yep.
They don't want to hear about how so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so and la 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 la, and how we're all in bed with a bunch of 300-pound tie-dyed hippies. It's just, it totally changes the field of vision. I do want to invite, because we've had no brave call-ins tonight. It makes me wonder if it's working.
It is.
309 Goddess. You can call in with a question about tonight's topic, or anything about Alexandrian witchcraft or witchcraft in general. We would be happy to answer your questions to the best of our ability.
But I think what is important to say is I've struggled with this personally. I'll be very, you know, vulnerable and frank for a second. I have struggled with this, where, you know, my background was in Catholicism when I was younger, and they have their own sort of fights or whatever, but it's so much larger and you can avoid it if you really want to. It's a lot easier to avoid. I do struggle with it sometimes, the sort of toxic nature that almost seems to thrive in the magical community, and I put that in quotes for a reason. It's almost unlivable on some point. And I have spoken to so many people who have said to me, I can't do this. I do my own thing anymore. I've given up on the concept of working with other people because of what it looks like out there. You know, and we as initiates do have a sort of obligation, right? You know, to present the craft correctly.
I remember I had an old coworker who knew a little bit about what I was about, because she knew I was an initiate witchcraft. She was very interested in it, asked a lot of questions, and when I got put onto the fame game, she was watching me on Facebook, and one day she didn't understand the difference between a famous or public witch and an initiate. She didn't, it's all the same thing to her, which I think is true of most of these people that are looking until we tell them otherwise. And they're only going to listen to you if you're credible, not if you're like blah blah blah. And so she said, "Oh, all these public witches are just big babies. I don't think I'd ever want anything to do with this. They're just a bunch of crybabies."
I know.
And she was just seeing the things that were going on, and it was like, well, it's not really because they're public, but, couldn't explain to her. She saw the whole thing. It's kind of like when you've got people that come into our stores in New Orleans, they might walk into Hex and say, "Ooh, this is a voodoo store." They don't see the difference just because you think they do.
No.
So in that essence, we are kind of all in the same bowl of soup.
So we do have one. We got
Hold on, don't you touch it.
No, I'm not going to.
All right, so we've got a screen as this. Oh, we've got
So
two.
it's Alex
Oops,
and Christian.
Sorry. Hold on a second. Okay, so let's hope I do this right.
I believe in you.
All right, we're going to take a call from Alex. Pretty sure this is what you do. Why is it doing it again? I know I'm doing it right.
You might have to refresh it.
Yeah, refresh it. Oh, because we've got 3 now.
We do. We're so popular.
At the top. Oh, got it. Yeah, we just had to refresh it.
Yep. Hi, is this Alex?
Hi there.
Hi, you're on Covendom. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm feeling good. Well, I was just calling to ask, has there ever been a sort of inter-occult witch war type conflict between people, let's say, of 2 different backgrounds, like initiates and the Golden Dawn or what have you?
Well, publicly, I think not really the Golden Dawn, obviously, for us anyway. I don't know of any witches having an issue with the Golden Dawn, but I have heard of, we had here in New Orleans, unfortunately, some conflict with some other groups just because of business and things like that. So sometimes, whether it's because you have stores or because there's monetary value or because of popularity, sometimes in the occult world you'll have that kind of competitiveness, and because of social media it can quickly turn sour. For instance, there were a couple people who had come to a soiree of mine, and it's quite unfortunate because I actually liked them, particularly the woman. She was very vulgar, but I liked her anyway. You can be vulgar and I can still like you. It was fine. We had a decent conversation, and she had admitted she thought it was all going to be rubbish, and she'd come to just be nosy and see what it was all about, and she was quite impressed at the time. But fast forward a few months later, they were on a tirade about how fake our tradition was and how no one respected the Alexandrians. It was on a stupid little group, obviously. But this was a local New Orleans thing, and it was based on local conflict, and because of this local conflict, somehow, I don't know, an entire tradition got brought into it, and they were members of the OTO. So, does that mean that I've got a conflict with the OTO? No, I've got friends that are in the OTO here, people that I like that are in the OTO here, and I've been to some of the OTO gatherings, not for a long time, so I don't have any issue with the OTO. I think that they were just 2 people that don't know about the magic of hospitality. And I think it's unfortunate they made those decisions, but I don't know of any major conflicts between there's no war between the New Orleans witches and the voodoo people here or something like that.
We don't. I don't think there's any major conflicts between large occult organizations or traditional ones. No.
I did have a leader of a Golden Dawn group here in the United States threaten to curse me once because I said I didn't think that his wife was really Alexandrian. There was a very private conversation.
Yeah,
it was at the time.
If it happens, it's more private.
But I seem to be doing all right. So
yeah, it's more individual, I would say, Alex, than institutional.
Yeah. I don't think, no, I've never heard of any big real things like that. Usually it's been traditions that are very closely related because it's schisms in, for instance, Gardner and Alexandrian come from the same source. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why there's a schism.
Was
a schism.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Oh, absolutely. And I asked the question just because I recall in an interview documentary with Janet Farrar, and she mentioned if another group is practicing blackmail to appease a interviewer. She mentioned something about a psychic police force that would report to the police and help. It seemed like a fiction, but I just didn't know if there was.
Yeah, probably for.
Well, I mean, I don't know what she was talking about off the cuff. It's not an Alexandrian thing, obviously. I will say that there are witches out there that if they know something bad's being done, they will work against it. But that would all be done privately to thwart something that shouldn't be done. And if you're blabbing enough to where the witches know what you're doing, then you deserve for your work to be undone, I suppose.
I know. Keep silent, children.
Shh. Thank you very much
Well,
for
thank you so
calling in,
much.
Alex.
Thank you so much.
No, don't do it because you'll do it wrong.
Just do the one drop on the green.
This one, right?
Yep.
Me and Levi are learning
Oh,
technology.
and you got to hit one more time. Drop call.
There we go. So now you know how to do it.
I
All
do.
right.
So we
We have another call.
We do.
Once you screen it.
I know who this is. It's Christian. Just so you know, Christian, your quote where you say one-piece Lee Foundation garment, it's one-piece lace foundation garment, is the quote from the
That's what I
women.
said, but it translated it wrong.
Oh, it translated
It wrong. It's a quote from the women, which
what's your
is one of my
question?
favorite movies.
Lucy, you can't be on the
One-piece
show.
lace
What's your question,
foundation-
Lucy?
One-piece lace foundation garment
Zips up the back and no bone.
Notice I never call into his
question
show.
My question is, because you mentioned 3 of the causes of the witch wars, do you think that money plays a role at times, or the success of the witch?
Not in the real craft, but I think that it has fringed on that in personal relationships. For instance, in a place like Salem, obviously there I can see that breeding that because there's so many people that own stores or have businesses there.
Yes.
But, generally speaking, in the history of initiatory craft, most of them were taught not to make money off of it, so very few of them do. However, and I know you'll understand this, there's a fine line between making money in the craft and being famous in it. I think most of these people are more greedy for the fame, and they're more greedy for that than the money, which is probably why most of them fail at it monetarily.
Oh yeah, they would lose all the money for that 10 minutes of fame.
Yes. So I think, I think it's more about the spotlight. For instance, there are actually very few people who do really well financially off the occult. Like, we know this to be true.
Yes.
Most people who write books or have stores are not doing, they're getting by. Which, that's a nod to them. It's not an insult. It's a nod to them that it's not what it's really about. So I think very seldom, do I think it can have an influence? Do I think jealousy gets involved? Sure. But when we're talking about, like on our subject tonight about the history of initiatory craft and witch wars, I don't think money generally played a role. I think jealousy did, however.
Yeah, I would agree with
I could be
Brian.
wrong.
That makes sense.
But I don't think any of them made a lot of money off the craft. Even Patricia Gardner writing books and things, I don't think they made a lot of money off the craft.
No. There's actually a private letter you can read between Gerald Gardner and another witch who's not, I don't think he's identified. It might
don't
be
get me
Daffo.
wrong, they were making money off the
They were.
craft. It just wasn't enough to fight over.
There's a letter
Maybe, I don't
where
know.
he's literally trying to find Daffo a job because of how broke they all are at the
Daffo,
moment. And it's because she can't find a job as an elocution teacher. But you can read the letter. It's in one of Heselton's books.
Oh, Heselton.
But no, money,
Yeah.
yes.
I found this soup can that used to belong to Alex. Isn't it neat?
Oh, God.
It's been signed. I find that
Well,
kind of
thank you
history
for
very
that,
banal. Nothing against him per se, but I've seen other people do it where it's like, who cares?
Thank you for answering my question.
You're very welcome.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for calling in,
Thank you,
Lucy.
Kristen. Blessed be.
Bye.
He really is Lucy.
You know my favorite thing is...
Ricky, I want to be on the show.
One of my favorite things was when she was brought up before the House Un-American Committee during McCarthyism, and she was accused of being a communist. It's a true
remember.
story. And Desi Arnaz had a great quote where he said, "The only thing red about Lucy is her hair, and even that's fake." It's such a good,
That's
I love that
horrible.
quote.
Is this? I think we've got one here.
William Hubbs. Wait.
Don't say their name online, you
Sorry.
nincompoop.
Wait till it...
Sorry.
Wait, this sounds familiar.
Well, it doesn't have a. Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Also, this is hilarious. Just enjoy this for a moment while this screens.
Damien, could you please never call in?
I know, right? I was looking at that and I was like, no, thank you. Okay, so we've got Scott, so I'm going to answer Scott. Hi, is this Scott?
Yes, hey, how are you doing, Blessed Be?
Doing well, how are you?
Fine, thank you. I think both of you guys look fabulous. I think you, Brian, I love that necklace, both of your necklaces, but that one in particular, hanging above your ankh, I just love it. It's exuding power.
Little goat devil for you. What's your question, Mr. Scott?
Yes, sir. Janet and Stuart Farrar. I have a friend. He follows them, has a signed book by them, and he knows of them. What was their path? I cannot remember what he told me. He's in my chess club, and we're always playing chess and trying to concentrate.
Okay.
Do you know if their path was? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Janet and Stuart Farrar were Alexandrians at one point. Later,
Okay.
Janet moved away from the tradition and would say that she had her own group and that she only labeled it as witchcraft, and she moved away from the tradition. She also, to my knowledge, and Brian knows way more about this, so I'll definitely let him fill in the details, she did not receive the full, to my knowledge, the third degree, and so anyone who claimed a downline from her would not be...
Oh, no, Janet received her.
Oh, she did. Who
Yes.
did not? Who am I thinking of?
I don't know.
I'm thinking of somebody.
No, Stuart was Janet and Stuart were both they were both initiated in what we now call the London Coven, which was near Clenagogue Gardens in London, obviously, and they ended up moving up the street from Alex and Maxine and prematurely starting a coven earlier than the third degree. But Alex did eventually give them the third degree. That's a completely different story. But no, she legitimately was a third degree Alexandrian, so was Stuart. But she's gone on now to teach her own form of witchcraft called progressive witchcraft with her new husband, and is no longer a member of the Alexandrian tradition.
Yeah. So that would be the answer.
But
Okay.
she'll always be
Thank
an
you.
Alexandrian initiate.
Yes, always. But thank you very much for calling in.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Bye. People online were, I was worried too, to the watchers of the broomstick thing, but it wasn't.
No, I thought it was too.
I did too.
Still could be.
I know, right? But no, I'm thinking of someone. It's my fault for that. Sorry.
No,
for
I
that.
really did think that, Jim. I
I
thought
know.
it's the broomstick guy.
I did too, but it's not. Yeah, it's not.
It could be. Never know.
Yeah, but Janet and Stuart Farrar, they were massively influential for a lot of people because their book, The Witch's Bible, was quite successful. And 8 Sabbaths
Look,
for
we're
Witches.
forming our own cone of power here on the X Education.
But yeah,
Everyone's like, it's the broomstick.
I know. We all know, we now have a shared language, watchers.
It's funny.
I kind of love that. We're screening somebody as well. As that screens, though, I do want to
Don't say their names.
I'm not going to.
Levi's going to be like, Paul
Living in
Smith is calling from 678
in this county.
5432.
Here's his social. Like,
Jesus. Do you know, I do think that the most intelligent people I know, and I'm probably one of these people, we just go so stupid sometimes. I think it's because the brain's on so much that occasionally it just
I forget the simplest things sometimes about craft, even though because we talk about it so much that sometimes your brain will just lose it.
That's the one thing I don't lose.
Hi, is this Jessica?
Hi, yes, this is Jessica.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. I saw you had a question about Gardner and Alexandrian craft. What is it?
So I actually put in a application for a Gardnerian coven, and they rejected me. Anyway, when I was filling out the application, I mentioned
We're not doing that,
some
Kristen.
Alexandrian stuff. So I was wondering if maybe if there's some kind of rivalry there, like they would reject somebody just because of that.
Based on what you're saying, you know, we have no way of telling you.
That's
you
the
know,
problem.
what their motives were, because here's how basically how it works is that all covens are autonomous and it is a secret society. You guys are driving me nuts. They never do this.
I know, it's adorable, kind of. I wish you could see this right now.
Anyway, the dogs are just having a hoot. So anyway, sorry, caller. My dogs decided they were just super exciting. So they can reject somebody for any reason they deem fit, and they're not going to explain it to you, and they don't have to. You know, there's lots of things that go into it. May not be anything to do with you. I mean, I've got no idea what was on the questions. I've got no idea what your answers were. And I have no idea whether you are interested in Alexander witchcraft. I will say this. When Levi first came to me, he said
I was going to tell the story.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I was going to say, if they were to reject you solely based on an interest in the other side of craft, that would be a red flag to me. When I first came to Brian about initiation, I said to him I was investigating British traditional witchcraft. And he said, well, this is an Alexandrian coven, and you're being a little broad about that. And I said, well, I do like Gardnerian writers, and I like the history of Gardnerian craft. And, you know, and Brian said to me, well, you should probably go talk to a Gardnerian coven. Like, you know, that was very open. There was no judgment. There was no...
And I gave him...
And gave me contacts.
You knew who they were already.
But you affirmed them for me. So when I came to Brian and I mentioned Gardnerian craft, that was not a negative for Brian. And he literally was like, yeah, go talk to them. Here they are. You know who they are.
What it was for me is if somebody's interested in multiple things, I know that they're not quite ready for what I am doing. You know, and I don't want people to tell me what I want to hear, but, you know, if you're exploring and you come to me and you say, well, I'd like to be an Alexandrian witch, but I'm also interested in Hinduism, I'm going to instantly know you're not done exploring. You know, because this is a priesthood, and so you should enter it in no differently than if you were going to go become a Catholic priest or a nun or whatever. And that has to be a 100% dedicated commitment, not something that has options.
Yeah. Does that answer the question a little?
But I doubt the very mention of Alexandrian would be the reason.
No.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You're very welcome. Thank you for calling. So we're screening a couple more right now, and I wanted to say that was actually something that I liked when I talked to Brian as a seeker, was there wasn't an initial sort of knee-jerk control mechanism. I appreciated that. And after investigating, which there is a funny story to that, it was the next day that I called Brian after I did some investigating and said, yeah, no, thank you, I don't want that. I want to be Alexandrian. But
and then we all met on Easter and didn't know it was Easter.
We did, like a bunch of
heathens.
heathens.
And the rest is, why are none of the coffee shops open? You know, let's go over here. Why is everything closed? It was Easter Sunday.
Was it? Nobody remembered.
None of us knew it was Easter Sunday. Now that's paganism.
So I'm going to take this call because I think I remember this, and I don't trust it.
My poor stupid thing.
While you do that.
I'm good.
Hi, you're on Covendom. Who's this?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Good evening. Merry meet.
Very nice to meet you.
All right. I was inquiring. I'm quite an old witch. There was a book once called King of the Witches by Alex Sanders. I don't know if anybody knows if that
John
June
Johns. Sorry, June Johns.
It's June Johns. It's a
Alex
biography.
Sanders actually never wrote a book. There's a man named June Johns that wrote that book.
Sanders wrote, well, he may not have wrote it, but it was about him.
Yes,
it was about
him. It was
him.
King of the Witches.
Correct.
I'm just asking, do you know if it's still in publication?
It's not in publication. I have a copy. You could probably still get it if you look for it.
I got mine on eBay.
Yeah.
It is no longer in print, but you can definitely find old copies of it. I have a copy.
I see. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And yes, you gentlemen do a very fine job.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you too.
It's Madam Coco.
Love the name. Have a great evening. I'm here for the name. I am. Coco Chanel's calling us. I did want to answer one before I take this. There was somebody up here who said something. I do want to make a point of, because Christian made a joke about the caller who called in to say that they do applications. I will say this is something I have noticed personally, and this is not a judgment in any way, shape, or form. The Alexandrian covens I've worked with do not tend to do paperwork. And what I mean by that is they don't tend to have literal applications, or they don't tend to have literal papers about your lineages. That is something that I think developed in certain coven traditions. It's something a little foreign to me, I have to say. That's not a judgment. It's not to say it's bad or anything. It's just not something I'm familiar with. Every coven I've worked with that was Alexandrian, it's very much more personal than that. We're going to meet. We're going to speak. There's going to be a glass of wine involved.
How I go with it is it starts out written, right? So it may not be an application, but it generally starts out written, whether it's Facebook or an email or something like that. Witchvox, I met a couple of people on there. It's gone now, obviously, but same idea, written. Then maybe, if it progresses, phone calls. And there's verbal, communication on phone calls, and then eventually meetings. But then again, we also occasionally hold soirees or things like that, so might meet people, through them. But no, I'm very instinctual about it. I don't do applications, nor do I follow the outer court system. I don't. It's not my cup of tea. These are American inventions that work really well for some people. It's if it works for you, it works for you. It's not the way that we've ever run things, and the way we've run things have worked for us. So.
Oh, Christian let us know in the comments, apparently Madame Coco was a reader who read in New Orleans for years and a very fabulous sort of personality. So thank you for calling in. That's super cool.
Don't know if I've ever met her. Maybe.
Mm-mm. Alexandrian Zoom. Huh? So we do have one. Okay, so we have Lori. I'm going to answer Lori. Hi, is this Lori?
Yes, it is. Hello.
Hi, it's wonderful to hear from you. I saw you had a question that you typed in. What is your question?
I just had a question, and maybe this veers a slightly off topic, but I was wondering what you guys thought about, big name pagans that are not initiates when they try to write exposés on covens or particular initiates, because it seems like, just from what I've witnessed on social media in recent years, I don't want to name names, but I'm sure you guys know one in particular, people are very invested in sort of trying to spin this narrative that initiatory craft is more prone to abuse or things like that, but yet in the public pagan community, you have completely random people that have not been vetted, leading ritual, presenting themselves as teachers, but nobody really seems concerned about that. I was curious what you guys thought.
Yes. What that basically comes down to is, the craft is an initiatory mystery cult. It is a secret society with fertility overtones, and sexuality is not off the table. Meaning we're not afraid of it, we're not afraid of talking about it, it exudes in our rituals. It may even occasionally happen in a sacred orgy. Tongue-in-cheek may I be? But that's intimidating to people who are uninvolved and don't know. And what I find to be the truth with outsiders is there are many experts. There are many people willing to tell me about Alexandria Gardnerian Craft who are not members.
Yes.
And they're sure they know what they're talking about. They're absolutely sure. To date, I have not met one that actually is. Because it's kind of like talking about masonry or anything else. If you're not actually involved, you don't actually know. You might think you know, you might have a general idea, but you don't know because you haven't experienced it. You haven't been involved. I know of very few cases of quote-unquote abuse in initiatory craft, or very few allegations. I know of a lot of allegations of abuse in people who call themselves witches, who run covens, who have not been initiated into the true craft. These are people that just call themselves witches and, get people to join their groups, and usually it's a perverted husband or something like that. It's usually involved, too much flirtation or whatever. But then one has to wonder, if you didn't you know what a key party was? One has to wonder if those are really abusive situations or if somebody just got dissatisfied. When it comes to the pagan community, like we've stated earlier, this has nothing to do with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we're never doing it at a pagan gathering. We're never doing it with pagans, where, we may or may not use that word ourselves. But what we do is in small private groups of 3 to 13 people, generally speaking. And they're usually people who've mostly known each other for years and have made vast commitments with each other and the work that we're doing. And we don't inform anybody about it.
And I think
So it's very easy to take the mysterious and point the finger and say, you must be the one up to no good. It's called witchcraft, my friends. It is a secret society.
And I think what Lori was saying is, though, she's talking about the people who
I'm with her.
That. Do that from the outside.
Yes, I think it is all speculation. I find most of the abusive cases, I'm going to be a bit mean here. There was a gentleman that was arrested and convicted here in New Orleans called Kenny Klein. And he was very well known as being Wiccan and being a high priest of the Blue Star thing, that has nothing to do with Alexandrian or Gardnerian craft.
Yes.
It's not in the same nucleus, and we don't have any connection regardless of any claims to the contrary. And I don't really know what they found. I'm not going to get into that, whether, he was convicted. People hear something like that and they don't know that, that's initiatory craft. No, that's somebody else's made-up version of initiatory craft. It's their initiatory craft. It's not the original initiatory craft. It'd be like if I went out and started the OTOC and, said, well, I'm OTOC, because it's my version of the OTO. And I was never actually in the OTO. I was never actually trained in the OTO. Outsiders are going to believe that I'm somehow connected to the OTO, but I'm not. I'm just using a label, a similar label, and possibly doing things based on what the OTO has published.
And Lori, one of the things that, if I'm not misunderstanding,
Sorry, bandwagon.
No, you're fine. Lori, one of the things I think you were saying that I very much agree with is it seems interesting to me, at least, that initiates or traditions of any kind, not just British traditional witchcraft, but initiatory systems such as the OTO or voodoo, the people who participate in those are held to the fire so much more by these outsiders than any of these self-appointed pagan non-initiate people are. So
Exactly.
That is what drives me insane, Lori, as well, which is they get away with murder in the terms of how hateful they can be and how over the top and rude and divisive, but they're never ever truly judged for it. But they're given free reign to write the most terrible diatribes
Well, I'm going
against
to
other
go
people.
down that rabbit hole of saying something you don't want to say. So I'm not going to name names, but Christian has been. There was a woman years and years ago that got all bent out of shape because of a comment about molestation. We'll just say molestation, right? And she had claimed she had been molested, and Christian had made a lewd comment. And so she became extremely offended and went on a crusade for years about how his horrible molestation comment, offended her and upset her, and she was really molested. Just recently, she was found joking publicly with a gentleman online about the same subject, molestation. It's called hypocrisy.
Yes.
Right? So, that's what it is. And I think we all see it for what it is. I don't think that anyone's, for instance, we just had WitchCon. There was, a small tribe of haters, which we always have pretty much the same small tribe of haters, like continuously moving around hating us. It's kind of like me and Levi always get like 2 dislikes on every video so far. Maybe someday it'll be 10 if we keep working.
I want 10 haters. That's my goal, Lori.
And it's, I'm like, do they watch it or just go? Some of them dislike it before it's ever even aired. It's just that sort of, that's what it's a game to these people. They think they're going to do something. They want power. They want to feel like they're influential. They want to feel like they're being heard. And when they get those 10 other people on a Facebook group, or 20 other people, or maybe even 100 other people agreeing with them, even though they may not even know what they're really talking about, it makes them feel important. And it's probably the most important thing happening in their life. And that's the state of it, really. I do think
but true.
Most initiates out there, honestly, are not on Facebook squawking about things.
No.
They're just not. They're not really on there talking about things.
No.
It's
No.
Not normally the case.
Did that answer your question, Lori, or did you have another one?
Yes, it did. I just wanted to add one more thing really quick, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
I the past 6 months or so, I have been doing, I'm a seeker in outer court Gardnerian.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say for anybody listening out there, if you are feeling drawn to it, initiatory craft, seek it out, because I have learned so much and I've grown.
Wait till you're initiated and they can actually tell you anything true.
Yeah.
That's so exciting, though. Congratulations.
It is. Yeah. So because I know there's a lot of.
Let me answer this question for this gentleman.
There's a lot of drama,
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you're.
Avoid the drama.
And you get to be a voice against that.
I get a question I want to answer and you skim past it.
But thank you so much for calling, Lori.
Okay, what happened to it?
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
You as well.
What happened to it? There was literally a question here. Well, I don't want to say what it is. It's like gone. I need to stop letting you sit next to the computer. You do this. I don't get to see anything. Oh, this is the one.
Okay.
But then we've got this one too. So the question, what witchcraft traditions do you see are valid that aren't Wiccan? Well, so first of all, I hate the pronunciation Wiccan, and of course, as long as people are stating the questions, poor Levi has to hear the same story. So Wiccan is just Old English for witchcraft, and originally it was witcha or witchy, and that's without accent. It meant a male or female witch. So in the English language, there's no difference between a Wiccan and a witch. You know, whenever I see someone say they're a Wiccan witch, I say, no, you're not. No, you're not. So we consider our tradition to be witchcraft. I consider the Gardnerian tradition to be witchcraft. In fact, we were the first witchcraft traditions. None of the other traditions, aside from the claims of Cochrane's Coven and Cardell's Coven, which covens don't make a tradition. Sorry, everyone. Traditions mean that there have been several covens formed, and both the Gardnerians and Alexandrians have covens formed throughout the world. And all of religious witchcraft is really coming through our filter because we were the original authors. Cardell, Cochrane didn't write books. They didn't go on newspapers. They didn't, go on TV, things like that. Mm-hmm. So, aside from spell casting and that interpretation, we pretty much are witchcraft. The modern notion that somehow Wicca is something separate means you're probably going off of the anthropological definition of witchcraft, where it's all magic. And in that case, the Golden Dawn's witchcraft, voodoo's witchcraft, like everything's witchcraft. We're not on the same page. So what witchcraft traditions I find valid are any that are practicing the religion of witchcraft that resemble that early movement. As far as line of succession and what I identify with personally, it would be just Gardnerian and Alexandrian. However, there are a lot of legitimate traditions in their own right, meaning that they're practicing the religion of witchcraft and they're priesthoods within their own right, but they do not have any connection to us or the original workings. They don't actually have the Book of Shadows. They don't actually have the training. They're not doing the same thing. There's somebody came along having read books written by Gardnerians and Alexandrians and invented their own trad based on those workings. That's my personal opinion.
I would agree with that. I would say if it's not the religion of witchcraft, it's sort of foreign to me. And
lineage Gardnerian and Alexandrian.
Yeah.
However, there are self-starting lineages that are, in their own right. For instance, the Cabot tradition, like God knows how it'll go on. It all traces back to her. It's Laurie Cabot.
Yeah.
No one really thinks about who was before Laurie Cabot. If it's whether it matters to you. For me, the succession and the power behind an Ishtar craft, like I believe there was a New Forest Coven. I believe there was a portal of power that was opened up. I believe that our initiations are tapped into something much older, and that's not a historical conversation. That's purely occult feeling on my part. And I think the proof is in the pudding. So that's important to me. And the legacy of occult initiations are important to me. However, the proof is in the pudding by the results. So 100 years from now, we may be having different conversations, but right now, the genuine line of successions that I see as being extremely valid within witchcraft are Gardnerian and Alexandrian.
And I would say this. I'm going to say do two things. Christians make sure to correct Brian. He's joking. He's like, I didn't say she was molested. It was she had a stalker. He's like, I'm not that evil.
No, I was using molestation as a guise for the actual word.
Because we can't say it on YouTube, you can get banned.
Yes.
But you might be talking about two different stories.
No, I don't think I am.
But what I wanted to address was the difficulty of one thing, which is this. When you're within a practice and it becomes your practice, not a hobby, not something you do once a month with some people in a park, and I'm not judging. I know that sounds really shady. Well, I can be a little shady sometimes, whatever. But it becomes your life.
It's okay to judge.
Yeah, if it
it's
becomes
called
your life,
discernment.
Then it becomes,
and taste.
becomes very difficult sometimes to be told by people who don't take it seriously, who are not a part of it, what you have to be in a group with. And that gets
Aspect
old.
617. Please just don't ever talk to me in person and get off my channel and go away. Like, God. That is the most horrible
misogynistic.
We're not going to say I really just think that that's a horrible thing to say.
Yeah. But no, that is a thing that actually happens. So, like, for example, if you're a devout Christian, like an incredibly devout believer, and let's say you're a Greek Orthodox, and somebody comes along who is a Jehovah's Witness, and they're like, no, we're both Christians. The practice is so removed at that point that it is impossible for you to have a shared conversation, and just because that umbrella term exists, it's not valid. And the same thing happens with me sometimes when I meet neo-pagans and they want to identify exactly as I do. And it's like, I'm not trying to judge you. It's just, we do not have a shared language is the issue. We're not talking about the same thing.
I don't have to sit with you.
Yeah.
At lunch, in the cafeteria, one of the things that people, and you don't have to sit with me either. One of the things I think people really misunderstood is one of the things I love about the United States of America, and we could say the same thing about the UK, is freedom of religion. Freedom of religion. You are allowed to worship how you like, with whom you like, where you like. Mm-hmm. For the most part, with the where you like, obviously. Yes. But it's your choice. You're not forced to worship with, people want to regulate it like all religion should be inclusive of a liberal belief. That's not religion. Religion doesn't have to be liberal. It doesn't have to have a liberal belief. Religion can be horrible. Doesn't mean it's my religion, but it can be. It can be as exclusive as it wants to be, and that's freedom of religion, and you have to support that idea. So, one of the things I say in witchcraft is like every coven's autonomous. What they're doing and how they're doing it and who they're doing it with is, you can feel like it's your business, but if you're not invited into the circle, you'll never know anyway. Not beyond what they choose to tell you, which is generally very little.
And that's true. You're not, it's also just, I'm going to say something a little harsh maybe. I have never met anyone, personally, who has an issue with lineage or the concept of initiation or anything like that, who has a legitimate, lived, serious practice. I'm sorry. I've never met somebody who comes to me and is like, well, you have to accept my practice. It's just as valid. I'm going to be mean here. I've yet to meet somebody who says that to me, whose practice is worthy of that validation. I just haven't. The people I meet who do, I can have really intense conversations with, are often OTO initiates, Christians, mystical.
Is this one we don't want?
Yes. Okay. And things like that. I can have conversations. I think so. I can have conversations with those people. But when somebody comes along and they basically just want me to validate their aesthetic or validate their hobbies.
Is this the same one?
No, thank you. Oh, no, it's already terminated.
Oh, okay.
But I can't do that, so I'm sorry. It's not something I'm going to do, right?
Oh, that's actually somebody I knew.
No, I'll tell you.
No, I think I know who that was. I think we just did something bad.
We can undo it. All things can be undone.
Oh, all right.
But I promise. But
I think I might have just banned somebody I know accidentally.
I just think I look bronzed. It's just the camera people.
Well, here's the thing. Can we go back to this here? So that sort of idea, Facebook user, 1972, it wasn't just Wicca. It was actually because it's gone now, but it was the Chaplain's Guide, because I actually formed a witchcraft church at one point in time. Biggest mistake of my life. But it was not just under the title of Wicca. It was actually witchcraft, Wicca, paganism. They lumped it all together. Wicca is no more a religion in its own right than witchcraft is. And they are the same words. It's very popular with you people, however, and that's fine. But it's not something we all use. And you got it from us, and you now tell us how to use it. You got the term Wicca from Gardnerians and Alexandrians. That's who you got it from. And you weren't initiated into it, and now you tell us how to use it. It's quite amusing, actually.
Yeah.
Levi's looking all kinds of...
I know, I saw that.
He's got jaundice.
I do. I'm ill.
No, he's not.
I'm ill.
It's probably this... First of all, we left the screen green. We didn't. No, we didn't. It's still gone. It's green on here.
Jesus,
it's green.
Brian.
I thought I'm sorry. On these camera we look at, it's still a green screen. I'm like, no wonder he looks bad. It's a green screen. It's
God
not.
bless you.
It's a fake curtain. At the store, when we get to do it where we like to do it, our curtains are actually real. They're not
black.
Fake. These are fake curtains. They're not real.
Brian's calling out our fake curtains. They're doing their best, Brian. These curtains came to work today, and they're trying.
You do look a bit tan in this cam. This camera's really weird, though. I don't think either of us really look like this. You know, either that or we do.
I'm not bronze.
And we don't know it. I'm way paler than this, actually. Like, this is like I'm not as tan as I look on this. It's also, my house is like, we're in the French Quarter gold room, so I think everything bounces off golden light.
Like the tan cam,
mustard
they call
light.
it. Perhaps.
Yes, I think it is a tan cam. I do think so. Everything looks a bit less white.
Yes.
Elbow cough, what does that mean?
He does that all the time. Like,
I don't know what that means.
You know, when you go...
Yes, well, we wanted to do it down there tonight, but it's they're redoing all the internet is being redone in the quarter, the French Quarter, so that's a big thing. So
I will say this: this is one of the things about Witch Wars that I do want to bring up, which is
we should start one. Let's start one tonight.
Just start rumors tonight.
Who should we start? I know a rumor.
I heard a rumor.
Yes, that's how it goes. That's that show. Have you seen that with that
yes,
power?
The Umbrella Academy.
I heard a rumor that you punched yourself in the face. We've got one processing here.
It's Christian.
Now, I might have... I don't know. So we've got a friend called Whitehawk who's been calling in for years, so I think that might have been Whitehawk.
Oh, it was a name that was very close to somebody who had called inappropriately.
Yes. So I think we accidentally banned you, Whitehawk, because Levi thought you were a thing.
We can undo
Levi will figure out how to do that, but I don't know if she's really on there because she hasn't talked. So,
no. But real quick, before we answer this one, I did want to say... I'm sorry I left it, but anyway, the witch...
He tries to hide comments from me.
I missed it.
So he scrolls them really quickly because sometimes he doesn't want me to answer.
I know. The whole thing about Witch Wars is this. I think an ego check is in need of a lot of people.
Yes.
Which is, this is a tiny frickin' world. And if nobody cares, people, like nobody cares.
Other than us.
Other than a handful of weirdo goth kids on this planet, no one cares. Like, this is the tiniest speck in an ocean of drops,
why aren't we
guys.
focusing on the good things? You know, like why aren't we focusing on the fact that we can have magical conversations? Why aren't we focusing on the fact that witchcraft is the first and only modern initiatory priesthood of the great goddess in Western civilization? Once again, Western civilization actually has a mystery cult surrounding the great goddess. That hasn't happened in a really long time. Mm-hmm. You know, the cult of Isis was one of the last ones. Levi loves Magna Mater. You know,
I do.
I was watching this. I fell onto a video, which was, of course, this, you know, bald man with a really long beard speaking in sort of trying to be a Viking accent. And he's just going off about how there was never a religion of the great goddess. And it's neo-paganism that's trying to create this facade that's, of course, you knew in 5 seconds I typed up, not being very factual. Because they always want to make it about this, like, culture. Like, there was no culture in Europe, of one singular culture. That is really modern thinking. There was no singular Viking religion. There was no singular, like, it wasn't like every Greek was like, I practice the state religion of the 12 Olympians.
Yeah, no.
Like, that's not how it really worked.
No.
You know, you might have belonged to initiatory cults, you might have gone to certain temples, might have depended on where you lived. Like, me and Levi had been to Eleusis. If you lived in that town, your experience of Greek religion was going to be very different than someone who lived in Athens. And if you lived in Athens, there was a great goddess.
Yeah.
You know, and she towered above everyone else, even Daddy Zeus, because we've seen it. Daddy Zeus's temple's way down here. Overlooking it is the Parthenon. You know, and there's nothing higher. To this day, nothing is allowed to be built above the Parthenon. That has been a rule in Athens forever.
Yes.
You know, and it's why the city's so wide. But it just got on my nerves. But in any case, you know,
found
we're
another
here
phone,
now.
so we're good. But
yes, okay, we'll take
Christian. Is this the Lace Peace
We should have
Foundation?
taken her. She's been waiting for so long.
Hello?
Yes, because I have a comment.
Well, this isn't a comment show. This is a question show.
Form it as a question.
Yeah, well, in this, I can't form it as a question. It needs to be said.
I think that we can talk about it after, because I think I know where you're going, and I'll tell you what I was thinking, but you may not be knowing who I'm talking about.
No,
Moon.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but you're using the wrong...
I was using the wrong term about moon on purpose. It was not an accident.
But you've said the wrong thing.
I didn't even say...
It needs to be corrected on... You're not saying the right thing, and it needs to be corrected on air, and I keep asking, so I've called in to
please do so. Hurry up.
Thank you. So anyway, I have never made fun of anybody being molested or being RAAPED or anything else. This person claimed to have a stalker, and I don't believe this person had a stalker because she would not be putting her name out all over the internet if she had a stalker. I would never make fun of somebody who had been either sexually assaulted or molested in any way, nor have I ever done so. I just want to correct that on air.
And it is corrected.
Thank you,
all right, bye.
Bye. Wait, no.
Can we ban it?
Not that one. No. Oh. Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Brian and Levi.
Yes.
Right when he was like, I was like, is this a problem? He thought you were someone else. I saw your name right when he's hitting. I was like, wait, I think I know who this is. Sorry, we can look to see if we can unban the number.
I'm so sorry. It was so similar to a different call, so my apologies.
Anyway.
It's okay. I have one comment and one question.
Okay.
One is, Brian, I think that this show has garnered you a lot of respect in terms of your knowledge, in terms of the way that you bring out what the important issues are, and you hit the nail on the head. Now, my question is, this witch war in Salem has been going on for at least 20 years that I can go back. What do you think is the cause of the witch wars in Salem?
Well, in Salem, I think it is about money.
Agreed.
Mostly. But I think it started out, it's not really true, because it's really weird. It's kind of about money. It can be about money, because there's so many people who are making their living off there, and you can make a lot of money if you have shops in Salem. Mm-hmm. Please, everyone go try to open one and fail. But anyway, so the reality of it is, though, it's also a huge microphone for fame. And this has been proven to me. I would have never believed it at one point in time. But I've seen examples of the stupidest things happening in Salem making the London news. Whereas the London news does not make Salem. Only in October, of course, right? It's not the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So in October, Salem just becomes, it's always the thing. Look at the movies and the shows we have. It's always the Salem witches. Even on WandaVision recently, it was a witch from Salem that was the villain. It's always something coming up. Right. Whenever witchcraft comes up, Salem is somehow involved in a lot of things. American Horror Story Coven, it was the witches of Salem fighting the New Orleans voodoo people. It's kind of part of our culture that Salem is identified with witchcraft, so it's made it a beacon. And what's happened in recent years is, although the craft originates in the UK, and although the craft best training comes from the UK has begun to become, within, not just recently, for a while now, has become influenced by American witches. There are a lot of people who live in the UK who know who Laurie Cabot is, but wouldn't know who Alexander Zadrell Gardner is.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people in the UK who identify witchcraft as just being, wart cunning or cunning men, and no idea about that, And I think that's why sometimes I think the reason why the word Wicca originally gave popularization in its mispronunciation was as a way to sort of cushion the blow for people, which was a huge mistake. All of the original progenitors said, no, not a good idea. But it was the sign of watering down witchcraft. And I do believe, honestly, one person is responsible for the propagation of that word, and it is Scott Cunningham. Like, I think he is what propagated it into being what it is now.
As big as it was, absolutely.
It used to be, it was always taught to us as just being an older word for witch. And until him, it was never used. And the marrying of his ideology to the neo-pagan community is where a lot of neo-pagans started identifying as, well, I'm a solitary Wiccan. I'm a Wiccan. Wicca's a religion. Blah, blah, blah. And then pretty soon it was like, Wicca and witchcraft aren't the same thing. And witchcraft was like slapped with that anthropological term. Salem is like a powder keg of intensity to all of this. Because everything that's happened everywhere else has happened much quicker there. And with money.
Yep, and with money.
And there's nowhere else like it. There just isn't. And I don't mean it's the most magical place in the universe by any means. I think it was made magical, but it has the history, it has the magic, it has every tradition of witchcraft, including Satanism, that you could conceive of exists in Salem, Massachusetts. You want the OTO, you want the Golden Dawn, you want witchcraft, you want Gardner, you want Alexander, and you want Danik, you want Cabot, you want this, you want that. It is all there because it is a modern mecca of witchcraft. I'm not saying it's being well represented there because I think a lot of people who are attracted to Salem are attracted to the wrong ideas about things. It's kind of like the Instagram culture. Being a witch is about being famous. Being a witch is about being fabulous. And don't get me wrong, love being famous in our small little fishbowl. Love, obviously, can't help but be fabulous. All of that is fine. I'm not insulting it, but it's until you've gotten a close-up, long-term view of Salem, you don't quite understand. It has its good side, it's got its bad side. But it is, nothing else is like it. If you took everything else and fast forwarded it, all of the conflicts, all of the traditions, all of the things, and you put it there, and then what you get's really weird there is half the people that live there want to try to be in every tradition they can be. That's another weird thing. It's like they want to be so valid as a witch. They want to be in every tradition. They want to be initiated in every tradition. They want to write a book. They want to own a store. They want to do everything a witch can possibly do to be the best witch
in one lifetime.
And it's like New York on witchcraft. I don't mean that in the sense because New York has its own history, but it's very fast-paced and very, it's very weird. Its concepts are very shattered. To some places in the world, it seems idiotic, but it does have its positive sides as well. And the positive sides are there's no better place to educate from. Unfortunately, there's a lot of voices, so people want to fight for those voices. There's no better place to become a famous witch than in Salem, Massachusetts. So a lot of people want that. There's no better place to make money in Salem, Massachusetts. Yeah. Money, fame, the voice of education. There's nothing bigger anywhere else in the world than Salem for witchcraft. And that's why there's too many competing factors, but money certainly is one of them. They're all competing, and I must enjoy the fact that I'm in that competition and I've never even lived there.
Lucky you. So anyway, I'm going to make this short because I just had my second Pfizer shot on Wednesday.
Congratulations. Welcome to freedom.
Yes.
Huh?
I said, congratulations. Welcome to the road of freedom.
Oh, God. If this is the road to freedom, I'm paying for it.
Yeah, well, that happens.
It will be worth it.
You're training your body.
Well, at least I can come down NOLA this summer.
They say people who have reactions are also people who have like more like fevers and things like that are people who might have been more severely affected by the coronavirus.
Yeah.
If you don't have much of a reaction, you probably weren't, you probably didn't really need it as much.
Yeah.
So that's good news.
Did we answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much.
Nice hearing your voice. Don't know what number we blocked. We'll see if Christian can fix that later.
I will make sure. Thank you so much for calling.
Okay. Thank you, dears.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I do want to add one thing to what's being said here, which is also, this is a huge off-putting thing to a lot of people. And
witch wars.
Yeah, like witch wars, the concept of it.
If you're going to have a witch war, I have one word of advice to you.
When?
Did you know I was going to say that? It's like you know me.
I know who you are, Brian.
God, we're becoming like an old weird couple. Come on. I know, terrifying, huh? Don't worry, Patrick. Don't worry, Christian. It's more like evil twins.
I will say this. If you don't have to participate in this. This is the other big thing. The vast majority of witches...
I don't,
And
really.
I'm going to be... Maybe this
And Levi
will come
knows
off,
this. I don't really that
this
much.
could come off as mean.
You know.
This maybe come off as mean. But, like, if you don't own a store, if you're not public, if you're not... Stop thinking you are.
Or
I'm
if you're not
sorry.
running a group that
Exactly.
matters.
Like, if it's just you and 13 people, you're not in this, it doesn't matter. Don't be in it. Don't choose to be in it. Like, enjoy your religion. Practice worship. Do magic. Create magic. Be magical.
Yeah.
Don't do this. Like, it's so
Now,
tacky.
The hard part is that there are people who have, tried to do that. And, for instance, I know people who've been attacked just for going to Hexfest.
Yeah.
Just for going. It's like...
I know.
Do you even know Christians that do that? Have you heard of any Christians who attack other Christians because they're going to a Christian festival they don't like? I'm sure it's happened in some weird realm.
Probably.
But it's just really bizarre, man. It's like, it's strange. So especially when you can see the diversity of presenters. I understand why, in Christianized position, for instance, why we might sometimes feel the need to correct things, fight back, defend people. And I have at times. But I just, quite frankly, think we don't need to. Because like Alex and Gardner, the work that we're doing rises above anything they're going to say. And it's going to go on. And so I honestly, my personal belief is the less we entertain it, the less we have to deal with it or think about it. But it's easier said than done sometimes.
So I think we definitely we have time for one more, and we've got one more, so that's perfect. Hi, is this Lillian?
Oh, I'm turning up.
Perfect.
Hold
Thank
on.
you.
Oh, I turned the volume off on my laptop. My apologies.
Thank you.
So what was your question, Lillian?
Yeah. Sorry, I dropped my phone and hung up the first time, so
That's
I called
fine.
back. Yeah, something which is kind of, you guys kind of already explained. I kind of already know, but both of you, this is the question. Why do you, I'm sorry I'm flustered because I dropped the phone and feel like such an ass. Why do you think that, at least some people I've been around in my life, there seems to be so many people who are suspicious or mistrustful of the simple fact that traditional witchcraft covens, Alexandrian, Gardnerian, have secrecy, have privacy, and value such.
Yes.
It seems to be, there are people that don't understand why this is of value.
I think
what do you think their big problem is?
Part of it's FOMO, fear of missing out, but part of it also is the culture that we live in right now, the generation, the millennial type generation, and the fact that we're all kind of being integrated into it, is this illusion that we're all living our lives in the open. That every picture is reality. That everything's out in the open. I mean, we all know it's not, right? But that's sort of the culture that's being bred. And so the idea of, I'm not going to show you a picture. I'm not going to share with you in a world of everything being shared. I think it's something they don't understand, and so therefore it must be diabolical. But the secrecy surrounding the mythology of witchcraft and the practice of witchcraft being secret and diabolical is nothing new to us.
No.
So I don't really care if they think it's diabolical. Maybe it is.
Exactly.
But if I'm not doing it with you, then what is it, your business?
And I think, to answer your question, Lillian, I believe that a lot of people believe that by being against this, that they're egalitarians, that they are trying to knock a tradition that they might believe is entitled or elitist or discriminatory.
Also just wanting to be the expert.
Yeah.
We've all
But
seen
I don't
these
think it's
people who
true.
are like, and I'm sure you've encountered this, Levi, where, I mean, I do it all the time, where it's, I'll literally have somebody in another tradition informing me. There was a woman once in my house, in the kitchen, looking at me in the eyes, telling me that Alex Sanders was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I said, oh, no, he wasn't. Yes, he was. And she sat there arguing with me. I had another initiative, started becoming cross. because she just couldn't grasp the fact that she didn't know what she was talking about, and that somehow, as actually being Alexandrian, I might know. I deal with it all the time. Oh, you know this, or you know that. Blah, blah. Yeah. It's a horrible woman that I met once. That shouldn't say she's horrible, but she's done some pretty horrible things to me that I thought was really ill-mannered for someone who considers themselves to be Southern. I met her for the very first time. She said, "Do you know, Alex and Gardiner were just perverted and they just wanted to go after women?" I said, "Gardiner was in his 60s and Alex was gay, so no, I don't think so, but okay, sure, that's your take on it." Once again, somebody who's never been involved, and she was involved in a Wiccan tradition that she now poo-poos on, which is the only credential she has. Not my problem. Doesn't have anything to do with us. That's where the anger comes from. The anger comes from, I wasn't actually in the party, so therefore I have to somehow attack the party and make it invalid to make myself. It's a case of blowing out the candle to make mine burn brighter. If initiatory craft sucks, if it's just Wiccan, if it's the same thing as Scott Cunningham and it's just that stuff, and it's not really cool, and it's not really powerful, and it's not really occult, and it doesn't really have any meaning, because it's something that's just a bunch of regurgitated fluffy nonsense, then my thing of having a goat skull on the altar and a creepy nail and my beautiful eye makeup then becomes so much more cooler than that other thing, when in fact they just really don't know what they're talking about. We invented good makeup.
Yeah.
Look up some of the pictures of Alex and his great eye makeup. It's just a thing. So there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. These people are just not actually educated in the history of witchcraft. Whenever anyone comes on and says witchcraft and Wicca are two different things, or whenever anyone comes on and tries to insist we're Wiccan, I instantly know they do not actually understand the modern history of witchcraft. They're going over the regurgitated internet information that's been written in a few books by a few authors starting in the 90s. It's been regurgitated over and over and over and over again. It becomes accepted definitions by a very small group of people. One of the things I'm going to say to catch Levi's attention is the language that has been involved and fought over in this community. I do want to remind everyone, it's a very small group of people.
Yes.
And small groups of people don't generally change language that quickly. So the narratives of the 90s will not be the narratives of 2030.
No, it just won't be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what I see within the modern witchcraft religion and within the occult world is a true desire for real information and depth. And Levi, I'm going to give it to him because he has some things he says about the evolution of religion, period, that fits into this narrative.
Yes. But I'm going to...
Okay.
But we answered you, right, Lillian?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank
I
you.
went on a bandwagon.
No, you're good. Thank you so much for calling, Lillian. Always a pleasure.
Did I even stay on subject?
Okay. Bye.
Bye, Lillian.
You're like, no, you didn't.
I'm letting it happen, though. So we're getting near the end, and I think what Brian's talking about, that'll be my end point, and then I'll give it to Brian, of course.
Think about enough.
I know. No, it's not that. It's that you hit on something important, which is the language is the language of experience is different than the language of description. So if I'm going to talk about my religious experience, and you want to talk about it in a descriptive way as an outsider, we're not going to have a conversation that works.
Thank you.
That's just not going to happen. So if you're going to tell me what it
box
means
you
to
should
be an
be sitting in.
initiate
Yeah.
and which box I'm going to sit in,
You're Wiccan.
I'm going to get a little testy.
You're Wiccan. Just so you know, you're Wiccan, Levi.
No, I'm not.
You're a Wiccan.
Right? I'm not a pagan. I'm not a Wiccan. I'm just not those things. And it's just so weird to me that I have to be told by other people. It's like religious experience is a deeply personal thing, but we happen to do it in a shared lineage, and we have a shared language. When I have talked to other initiates, guys, we exist. That's another thing I think a lot of new people coming into witchcraft do not know. They think it's a bunch of old stories. They don't realize that there are thriving Gardnerian and Alexandrian
This
covens all over
isn't
the world.
Cochrane, Sybil Week, and Charles Cordell.
It's not. It's a living religion.
Gardner and
we
Alex's
have that
legacy is
language.
still thriving throughout the entire world.
And that's
Well,
what
not the entire world, but at least Western civilization.
But as my ending point for Witch Wars, I'll say this. I will say this. They do bother me. You know, I've been very flippant tonight because we like to do that. We're a little tongue-in-cheek. But they do bother me immensely. It is trying sometimes to identify as a witch and to enjoy my religion, which is the center of my life in many ways. I mean, anybody who knows me personally knows that I'm a little bit of a fanatic. You know, I have a running joke with Brian that we're Shiite Alexandrians. You
Christian
know what I mean?
came up with that joke.
Yeah, you know, it's like, or yeah, maybe it was Christian.
No, Christian said you and Levi are like Shiite
Alexandrians, yeah.
And it's become a thing. And this was before the show.
But I am a little bit, you know, and it's because it's such a central process for me. It's such a central identity marker. It's so crucial to who I am as a person. And so the Witch Wars bother me deeply. And I have 2 bits of advice. If they don't affect you in any way, don't join in. If you are not being the one named, if you're not being the one attacked, just avoid it.
One of the things that I
forgot the other piece of advice, so that's just the one.
I am blessed with is just enough narcissism or introversion. I don't know which it is.
Just
really.
enough?
Just enough to where I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what public opinion is or what people are thinking about me or what's going on. So generally I tend, and sometimes it has driven Christian crazy, I generally tend to not care and I avoid it. Very seldom, you know, I care in certain cases, you know, or there are a couple individuals I don't like. I've named a couple of them. I don't know if it was a good idea, not out of fear, but should I, you know, is it worth my time?
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes, you know, it is human nature, and I am a Taurus, you know, so there is that. But occasionally I will run through the china shop, you know, but it's not really my thing. I spend my time, you know, I wake up in the morning and I have my idea of what my day is going to be. And that's the same way with my religion, you know, unless you're like showing up to the temple to work with me, you don't really exist unless you're someone who's really beneficial to me in my walk at some point, like people who I've actually circled with, you know, and I've said this before, if I have never stepped foot in an initiatory circle, you're not impacting me.
No.
Unless you're dead. You know, so obviously Gerald Gardner's dead. He's never been in my circle. Maybe at Halloween he has. I don't know. I'm sure he's been invited to the party. But the point of it is if you've not stepped in the living world with me into a circle, you may be an initiate. I may give you the nod that you're an initiate, but you're not influencing me. You're not impacting me. You're not bringing food to my house, good or bad, or wine to my house, good or bad. You're not working magic with me, and you're not worshiping the gods with me. And in the end of the day, our brief brushing of the wings in whatever moment we had isn't going to mean anything to any people. Our brushing of the wings is going to mean something because we've worked together, we've built something, we actually impact each other's religious life.
Yeah.
You know, why do we do this? Well, I'm not going to speak for Levi, but the reason I do this is to light a beacon for the true seekers that I feel that are out there, to give them the opportunities that I wanted to have.
Yep.
That's why I do this. Service to the goddess. You know, and I do believe that to be true. You know, yes, I do like my nice vacations, and I'm glad we run a successful retail business and a successful everything we do. I very much enjoy being wealthy. But I never expected that witchcraft was going to make that happen. You know,
and on that note,
it's not my motivation. It's my motivation when I put my business hat on. And you could ask anyone who knows me, when Brian puts his business hat on, I don't act very much like a high priest.
And I'll say this. I will say this, and then I think we'll go, which is, I want to word this correctly. I used to have this debate.
Why now?
I know, right? I used to have this debate with my partner about, you know, sometimes he would ask, what about these witch wars? Why doesn't this drive you crazy? Or so many people seem so bombastic, including the founders.
It hurts people.
Including the founders. But there is another way to look at it that I do want to leave you with a tidbit of, which is, I told my partner once, when we think of a spiritual being, you see a monk and I see a Maynard, right? There's another way. We are not Methodists, and that's another thing. You know, we are witches. If you're claiming the title of witches, there's a bit of naughtiness. There is a little bit of
that's
of
the
ecstasy.
Other thing. I think
right?
that the pagan community doesn't have that.
No.
The pagan community doesn't have that witchcraft. You know, it just doesn't.
Yeah. And that's what I would say too, is like, if it does bother you, that's another way that has helped me. Because I'm like, oh no, it's the witch wars. And then I realized I'm just being high and mighty. I'm a witch, and these are witches. And so if you're going to be that, then be it.
And most of the witch wars we see going on nowadays aren't actually conducted by witches.
No.
We can't really classify them as witch
No,
wars.
they're not real witch wars. And so I'm just going to say, yeah.
Well, anyway, so we have our episode 11 will be not next week because Levi's going on a little bit of a vacation, so we'll have a week hiatus. We haven't decided what we're going to do. We've got some ideas, so if you have any requests, feel free to send them to us.
Shoot them in the comments.
It has given us ideas before, but we've got episode 11 coming up 2 weeks from now, and we very much appreciate you all watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. We will try to answer them. Doesn't mean you'll like the answer, but we will try to do it. All right, thank you all for watching Covendom, and see you very soon.
Bye.